What is the most spiteful thing an ex has done to you? My ex filed a bogus restraining order not allowing me to see my son who I was taking care of while she was at work. She filed that I was going to kill him and her and then take him overseas. The court accepted the order. 6 months later, she calls saying, "You need to start watching the baby again." I start watching my son again and then I ask her if my son could spend at least one night a week with me. I was retired from the police force due to an on-the-job injury and so I had the benefit of spending time with my son. She flat out refused. Long story short, after all the false allegations she stated about me, false kidnapping reports, having the police knock down my door and my son and I in shock. Years of court proceedings, and even though the courts and state social worker found her to be a scorned woman and a rampant liar, they awarded her full custody. It's been 5 years, 6 months, 7 days, 16 hours, 4 minutes and counting since I last saw or spoke with him. I cannot see my son, which I still pay $400 a month in child support, and he only lives 10 minutes away from me. Attempted suicide, or at least claimed to attempt suicide, multiple times purely to get my attention. The first time it happened I called an ambulance, only to have the police call me back 20 minutes later saying she was clearly making the whole thing up. Also regularly threatened to crash her car with both of us in it and to kill my family, and once tried to stab me with a kitchen knife. Once we broke up, she told all of our mutual friends that I was an abusive, cheating bastard, neither of which is even remotely true. By the time I realized what she was doing, most of them were already refusing to talk to me. Of that entire group, she manipulated all but 2 or 3 into hating my guts. My ex-girlfriend and I shared a bank account after living together for 2 years. I know the groundwork for a happy ending. Well, she was saying she had a job when she didn't and was lying about money while I was working every day. So I broke it off with her and moved out, then went to the bank to close our account. I was told both parties had to be there to close the account, but she wasn't coming around for a while. So I just took my name off the account and opened my own new one. Bank of America wouldn't screw me, right? Fast forward 3 months later, and I had a few grand saved up and doing well. She wanted to get back with me, even though she now had a boyfriend. I had no interest anymore. Well, I go out to get some Gatorade before Ultimate Frisbee and none of my cards are working. I call BOA and they tell me that there is fraudulent activity. Yet my ex had written $40,000 in fraudulent checks from our old account. The bank saw that I used to be on that account and drained it completely to cover the $40K. I am not a guy that has credit cards, so this was my only source of money. Period. I was flat broke and it sucked. I took her to court, but she doesn't work, so I hope one day to get a few dollars of that back. My ex-wife started freaking my best friend of 14 years as soon as we separated, but I allow the possibility that it happened before that. Not only did she crush my soul, but took my best friend who I looked up to. He was also married. I hear they had a baby now and he is still married. Whatever. I hope they both die of shark AIDS. My ex set everything I had left at her house on fire. She bragged about it over the phone later. Even your GBA. Wait, my GBA? Yes. B. My GBA is sitting right next to me. You set your GBA on fire. Around 8 years ago, while still dating her, she tricked me into getting her pregnant, sabotaged the birth control, and as soon as she got pregnant cut all contact. I tried to remain civil with her, and I have been up to this day, but she quite clearly told me the only reason she started dating me in the first place is because she wanted a child, and I had never factored into her plans. When my daughter was born, she didn't put me on the birth certificate and put the father as unknown. Took her to court multiple times, but she denied paternity was mine and the courts could not force a DNA test. She eventually moved and completely disappeared off the radar. I have an 8-year-old daughter out there somewhere who I have only ever seen once. I think about her every day. Falsely accused of domestic violence and had every journal and photo of my childhood taken from me. Also every piece of physical belongings that I had at the time. It all came out in the wash on the domestic violence thing. The judge started to see it was all a hoax, but dang, the most trying 6 months of my life. Me and the lady split a few months ago. Out of nowhere I get a random text from her. which happens to be a picture of her hand grasping a dong of impressive stature. She began to explain how thankful she was I broke up with her so she could find us such a dong. I wanted to be mad, but couldn't. Just kind of stared at the picture for a while thinking good for her. My buddy's ex cheated on him with our roommate, then turned into a super vindictive bee when he found out. The day she moved out, she filed a restraining order against him claiming that he was prone to violent outbursts and a danger to himself and others, which is the exact opposite of this guy. Most level-headed guy I know, who got cheated on with one of his best friends. Then with her shiny new restraining order she weasels her way onto the volunteer staff at the anime convention he attends each year. A week before, got his admission revoked and he couldn't get a court date fast enough to call her BS before the con. Once he did get one, the judge basically told her to get the frick out with that BS. He brought a crap storm of evidence. My ex is a physician and an addict, so she can't manipulate with the best of them. When we decided to split, it was quite clear who was in the wrong, and we agreed that the debt she had accumulated through her multiple tours in rehab, well north of $100k, would stay with her. We didn't have any children, or any joint property to cause any fits over, so the divorce seemed pretty straightforward. She got a lawyer to help push it through, and I was going to try to not get one of my own to save costs. Obvious mistake. I was supposed to go to her attorney's office to sign some paperwork, but was having trouble reaching someone at the office to make a time to stop by. Her lawyer emailed her that day saying that he hadn't heard from me yet, and she forwarded this email to me, without realizing that she was forwarding me the entire email chain that she had with her counsel. Oops. In the email, she very clearly stated that she wanted to slap me with the rehab debt, stating that I was complicit in her drug use. Totally false. Needless to say, I went pretty crazy, and immediately hired the most cutthroat lawyer I could find in the area. My lawyer was awesome, and cheap, and he routinely put her in her proper place. This wasn't spite directed at me, but it was pretty narcissistic and ridiculous. My ex broke up with me and took our jointly owned car to another state, proceeded to lose a series of jobs and fail to help pay any of our joint debt. The agreement had been that he would pay it all, as I was a poor grad student and he was supposedly walking into a six-figure salary. I had to track down his mom to get my name off of his car loan as he wouldn't answer my emails about it. I had to pay the remaining joint debt off myself slowly to preserve my credit. $16k. Then he had the gall to come to Reddit and post an AMA about how he purposefully left his high-paying job to follow his dream and become a penniless writer, despite Reddit pretty much immediately calling him out for receiving unemployment benefits, which you don't get if you leave your job. He brought up our relationship in the AMA and mentioned how he had paid all of our joint debt himself when he left since he could afford it and I was just a student. After all the time and saving it took me to get rid of that debt myself, that was pretty crappy to read. Pretty much the whole AMA was very self-congratulatory like that. A lot of people bought into it and stroked his ego, and it made me realize just how fraught with single-sided BS that subreddit might be. I had an ex spread the rumor around my small hometown that I had physically abused her through our relationship. I couldn't figure it out at first, but all of my platonic girlfriends suddenly started hating and avoiding me when I would visit. When I called her out on it at a party, she just started laughing and said, "Oh yeah, I was just mad at you and told people that. Isn't that funny?" All I could do was shake my head and say, "No, B. That's not funny at all." I still have to correct people to this day, 2.5 years later. I started dating a girl just out of high school. Her ex-boyfriend was abusive. When he found out that we were dating, he tried to befriend me. I was unaware of his abusive habits until he tried to beat my butt one day. That didn't work out too well on his end, so the next attack was to call the cops and my parents and report that I was selling weed. That didn't work out either, and no drugs were found. He found out I smoked pot in the week we were friends. His final frick you was putting her little brother in the car with him and driving off a bridge. He killed both himself and her little brother. We find out later that he had been befriending her brother too, so there was no real suspicion when they got into the car together. 3 years after I broke up with my ex, she found out who my new girlfriend is, Somehow got her phone number, bought a disposable phone and texted the new girlfriend that I was cheating on her, used a different name and using her previous knowledge of a birthmark location and what I like to do in bed to effectively throw new girlfriend into rage, and she didn't believe me due to the contents of the message. Forever alone. My first serious live-in girlfriend cheated on me with several of her past partners. I could never catch her doing it, but for a variety of reasons I knew. I was nuts about her though, and she lied like a politician. Finally, my best friend's older brother nailed her, on purpose, to prove it. Yeah, thanks for that, I guess. I packed up my crap and left, peacefully, but I had forgotten to grab my art portfolio from behind the couch. I called her that afternoon and said I would be right down to get it. As I pulled into the driveway, she dropped the lit match onto the gasoline-soaked pile of my entire life's collection of artwork. Never did another piece of artwork again. Frick that. See. Right after high school, there was a girl who liked me, but the feeling was not mutual. She decided to cope with her rejection using the means at her disposal. She was an assistant manager at a video rental chain. I had stopped renting there, but my rental account was still open. She started checking out movies under my name that I never actually borrowed. They would never get returned, so massive late fees plus replacements fees showed up on my account. She also changed my mailing address in their system so that I would never receive the notices in the mail. It wasn't until close to a year later that I started getting the phone calls from debt collection agencies. It took years to get them to stop, and it negatively impacted my credit because I had no proof that the debts weren't valid, whereas the video chain had computer records of the rentals. I dated a hot crazy girl in high school. I thought that I would be super cool and take her out to my parents' lake house. After we broken up a couple of weeks later, she and boyfriend, whom she dated before, during, and after we were dating, rented a U-Haul van and cleaned out the house of all of the furniture. She even stole my 8-year-old little sister's bunk bed. The only thing left was the fridge because they couldn't get it through the door. Dad found the house trashed and was peed. We didn't find this out until a couple of years later when her boyfriend fricked up and got caught. He admitted to stealing our stuff since the cops were able to match the serial numbers on the washer and dryer. I knew something was up when she called me up around Thanksgiving before we got the news about her boyfriend that she really loved me and really missed me. Stupid me thought this girl was coming around and we would get back and life would be great. 2 weeks later I was giving my report to a detective and she is now currently in jail. In hindsight, insurance paid us for all of the stuff stolen, which was worth more than the current condition the stuff was in. The cops said all of our stuff was fricked up beyond repair. Not to me but my mother-in-law. She was married for a couple months and got pregnant. Her husband told her to get an abortion. Being in a small town, she had to drive several hours to the nearest clinic. She waits outside for an hour or two and can't go through with it. So she calls him to tell him she can't do it. He hangs up on her. After a long drive home, she comes home to an empty home. Everything including the ice trays in the fridge are gone. Only things left are a rocking chair and some of her clothes. He took some of them. He never shows back up. I dated this guy for about 3 months. December 2008, February 2009. And then I broke it off because he was trying to control me and I wasn't going to go through that again. Before we broke up he was living me and subletting his apartment. Well, once we broke up I wanted him gone. Unbeknownst to me, he had gotten himself a residency permit, which meant I could not legally kick him out. I spent 9 months fighting this. In the meantime he would slap himself in the face until it was bright red and then call the cops and say I was beating him. I would get arrested and then let out the next day when he decided not to press charges. Oh, and he did that about once a month. The apartment was in my name so I couldn't just leave it without penalty, so I was essentially stuck. He had manipulated the police department into believing him, so nothing I tried to get him to leave worked. Finally, in December of 2009 I had met a new guy. Well, the ex decided that if he couldn't have me, no one could. He deadbolted my bedroom while I was sleeping so I couldn't get out, and he told everyone I know that I had herpes and had a history of getting knocked up and getting abortions, which essentially ended my new relationship. I couldn't take it anymore. I called my dad, had him come pick me up. I lived 1,300 miles from home, broke my lease and got the frick out of there. My ex wrote a poem about my dong being small. It was like 10 verses long, and it was actually very good. She sent it to all my friends, but not me. I found out 5 years later she did this. My friends showed me it. She had sent it via MSN email to everyone and I was like, dang. She owned me. Luckily though, I fricked her sister a year prior to discovering this poem. Not to spite her or anything. Her sister just really likes me. So I guess we are even? I don't know. And anyway, it's not that small. It's okay. Accused me of RP. She said that every time we'd had intercourse in our 5-year relationship was RP, and that I beat her regularly. Despite absolutely no evidence, the police had to pursue it as they're bound to investigate every accusation of that kind. No evidence. Case was dropped. When my ex and I were going through a divorce, he decided to share with me that a year and a half prior, he had in fact took my dog, she was 14, had her since she was 6 weeks old, with him to work, dropping her off in the middle of nowhere on the way. She was afraid of him, but he lured her into his truck with the words that every dog loves, bye bye. He even left the gate open to make it look like she got out on her own. I searched for that dang dog for months. He sat back and watched me cry, put up posters, go to every animal shelter around us. I hate that sucker, not only for that reason. He also is a religious weirdo. I don't know if this will bring you any comfort at all, but I would share. We have animals dumped out here, middle of nowhere ranch, and we have taken them all in and loved them like they should be loved. Some were old sick and when they passed, we would bury them under a beautiful oak tree and honor them. Nothing out of the ordinary. I came home one evening and found a note that she didn't love me anymore, had moved in with her parents and would appreciate it if I could be gone during the upcoming weekend so she could collect her stuff. Stunned and stupid as I was, I complied, came back home Sunday evening to find the place completely empty. She took everything, except one thing, a 22-volume Britannica she bought the month before, despite my protests, and had only paid the first installment for. When I asked for explanation, she told me that since I had a job and salary and she was a student, I would be simply able to replace all the furniture and pay off the encyclopedia. The first thing I did, the books, bought in her name, I sold and I spent the money on a trip to Paris. During my second deployment to Afghanistan, I deployed with a friend of mine who I now consider to be a brother. When we first started our tour, his wife told him she would write weekly. Me and all the other soldiers eventually found out this was a big fat freaking lie. Now this brother of mine goes months without hearing from his wife. The longer he doesn't hear from her, the sadder he gets. His morale dropped so low that my 1SG, first sergeant, pretty high rank, was suggesting putting him on suicide watch. So about 9 months in our deployment, he finally gets a letter from her. After mail call was over and we were dismissed, me, him and 3 of our buds ran to our tent as fast as we could to see him open the letter. After seeing how excited he was, the most horrendous and fricked up thing happened. He ripped the envelope open and inside was divorce papers. I am very much against violence used on women, but to this day I wanna kill that bee with my bare hands. My ex contacted the local police, county sheriff, and ATF and told them that I had assault rifles, drugs, and bomb making materials. She also told them that I was highly unstable and suicidal, and that I would shoot at any law enforcement that approached my house. In essence, she tried to have me killed. She also contacted my place of employment and said that I was suicidal and dangerous, and contacted various friends, family and organizations with the same story. My ex was homeless, living on the streets in London. We met through a friend who put him up for a week. We dated and after a few weeks I let him live with me in student halls. Yes, big mistake, but the guy had nothing. I could have been kicked out etc. Anyway, I get him a job where I work and he starts fricking all the girls I work with. I found out months later, and to put the icing on the cake, given me chlamydia. By this time, he'd found himself a place to live, a better job and applied to uni. He graduated last year. No thank you for feeding him, giving him my bed, just an STD and a broken heart. I worked night desk at my dorm. My ex brought guys home and had me sign them in. Then before my shift was over, she walked the guy out with her hair all messed up and in her super short shorts and a wife beater. I look back and laugh now. Okay. While splitting all of our stuff during our divorce, she opted to claim ownership to every single photograph in the house, including the very small handful that I still had of my brother who had died years before. I found them on accident while making sure she wasn't taking more than her fair share, and she claimed it was just an oversight that my 5 pictures were wrapped in an envelope, inside another envelope, and packed in the bottom of a box. Karma. I'm a solid foot taller than her and she outweighs me by 40 pounds now. Let's see. She sent bizarre postcards under random people's name with gibberish written on it. 3 postcards to my work and 3 to my apartment manager's office, which weren't even mailed but dropped off. She also sent a manila envelope to my apartment manager's office, which happened to be porno magazines, which was also dropped off. She called Pizza Hut to deliver $100 worth of pizza to my work, which wasn't paid for at all. She also got me on a mailing list for erectile medicine and Victoria's Secret, which got sent to my work. She also took a ton of food items out of my apartment which was not hers, claiming it was hers because she bought them, using my money. My soon-to-be ex-wife has alleged that I'm not fit to have unsupervised visits with my daughter, age 4. Before I left, after years of struggling to make things work, I was her primary caregiver. I even had to travel and appear in court on a show cause hearing because she obtained a temporary restraining order. I was the working parent at preschool, cooked, cleaned, did laundry and the grocery shopping. I was a freaking house husband and now she alleges I can't be trusted to care for my daughter for a weekend. Told me she had a miscarriage when she didn't. Then after telling me I had a kid and the state took it away from her, she had someone else sign the birth certificate so I couldn't get custody. Luckily, I was able to challenge paternity and get custody of my child. She has since lost all rights to him, and my current wife has adopted him. The ex-husband cleaned out our joint bank accounts, dumped our cat into the woods, gave our dogs away, was in the process of starving our pet bird to death before animal control rescued it, took my car. But most horrible of all, he made up a bunch of stories and had his family lie in court and I lost my daughter. I went from being a stay-at-home mommy seeing her 16+ hours every day to getting her 3 months out of the year. And I have to pay him child support. I found out the hard way that money really can buy you anything. Oh, and the crap storm continues. Our divorce has been finalized and he won. Even so, he hasn't paid on any of my debt that was assigned to him by the judge. He often doesn't answer when I call to speak to my child. And he just got married 3 months after our divorce was finalized and he tells my daughter that she has 2 mommies. Frick my life. Stalked me for 1 year after breakup. Made false email addresses similar to my name and emailed everyone I know telling them I was a bad person, or swearing at professors, etc. Called me 10+ times a day for a year. Same treatment for any girl I had any interest in. Showed up everywhere I went. Killed herself in front of me. Yeah, she was spiteful. My son's mother freaked out when I got engaged and bought a house with someone else, so she took off 4 months with my son, and spent that time harassing and stalking me, filing bogus felony charges, etc. I told her my fiancée was pregnant, that it was an unlikely pregnancy, and that it was a very easy one to lose, so please stop causing us stress. Her response: I don't give a crap. She cost me my fiancé, the pregnancy, the house, and my new job. She ruined both of our lives, and messed up life for our son, all because I didn't want her. I told her at the beginning that I had met someone, that it was serious, and could she please just act like an adult and share our son and everyone move forward. She said yeah, sure, no problem. The day I told her I was getting married, she started her crap. No one's life has recovered since. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.